everyone. Namaste, namaste. Welcome, Nitai ji. Welcome, everybody online. We have a special satsang today. We are going to be reversing our age. How to be childlike. Last week we were discussing this theme. I think we were on pilgrimage in Dwarka and Somnath, and we were having interaction in the satsang in the car, and this question came up. So we thought Nitai ji is coming. Nitai ji is the Director of Education for Life worldwide, and for anybody who is new to Education for Life, these are the principles of education laid down by Master Paramahansa Yogananda ji, and among so many disciples that Master had, Swamiji took that up quite uniquely on one level, because Swami took up Master on many things that he wanted to see in the future. And so this beautiful principle of education for life. And I remember very keenly that moment when Swami said, we need a school here in Pune. It was the year 2010. And of course, we have a school here, and I welcome Nitai ji, who is regularly visiting us. And I welcome you on behalf of Ananda Sangha Pune to take us into this satsang of how can we be childlike. It also comes from that teaching of Master. And Swami said, not childish. So maybe I was wrong in saying we are going to reverse our age. But in response to that little question somebody had posed during the pilgrimage, I said, Swami had that beautiful quality, which we see as the years and our practice, on the path comes. I said it was an interesting mix of being very childlike, yet there was a sense of deep power, divinity around him. And so I'm very keen to hear on this subject from Nitai ji, who also spent a lot of time with Swamiji. Nitai ji was also the first head monk Swami appointed when he started the men's monastery many decades ago. So we are very keen to hear from you, Nitai ji. Please come. Yes, if you'll be here. And do you want me to chant for you, or would you like to take us into chanting? Use the guitar? Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Om Namo Narayana, 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 Om Namo Om Namo Narayan, Om Namo Narayana, 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 Om Namo Narayan. 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 Let's go into our meditation. Taking the vibration of that chant of closeness to God, focus on the divine presence, letting that flow out from the point between the eyebrows, filling our brain, mind, peace, expansion, joy, love. Expanding out to fill the heart, focusing all of our feelings, devotion, openness to that one presence that completes us. Now is the time to talk? Yes. Okay, let's stand up though. So it's really special for me to be back. Um, this is, I don't know, my fourth visit to Pune, something like that, fifth. So it's not like coming, it's kind of like coming, this is one of my homes now. I don't have a regular home at this point in my life, but Pune is certainly one of the places where I do feel at home. And thanks to the wonderful energy of all of you guys and making this possible. So I guess hand to the topic today. I think it was about, what time was it? About 1:30, 2 o'clock when Somya said, oh yeah, there's a topic. And I said, oh, there is, okay. So fortunately, obviously it's a topic that I'm quite familiar with. The whole idea of childlike energy. Something that certainly has support in the scriptures. For those of you who know the Christian Bible, there's a famous quote of Jesus, unless you become again like little children, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. So that's a pretty good gateway direction. So to explore that, I look back, as a young man, and I just, thinking about what to do with my life. And there was something about children that just attracted me, drew me. And there were certain qualities that children have that I know in this culture, in the Indian culture, are very deeply valued. I've seen that time and again. It's a wonderful part of the depth of the ancient teachings that have come down through India. Because I do feel like in the higher the yuga, the higher the age, the more people appreciate childhood. The lower the age, the more they think, what are these brats doing? they're treated as kind of subhuman, and why can't they do things the way adults do them? And I see that in the kind of a gross form a lot of the times in the West. I remember a long time ago, I think it was my first visit to India, which was 1969. So it was I got to India before a lot of you guys did this lifetime. But I was just watching, I was in downtown New Delhi, and I was watching a little street corner scene. And there were two obviously important businessmen. They were dressed in a kind of a business style, and they carried themselves with a lot of importance. And I just happened to be watching them. And then two little children walked up, and they stopped their conversation. They bent down and they started to interact with the kids. And just, I don't know if they knew the kids or not, but it was something that was striking to me, because I thought I would never see that in the West. The businessmen would be completely convinced that their world was more important than anything this child could do. And they would just kind of continue their thing and miss the whole opportunity to interact with the children. So I know that I'm speaking to the choir here with this kind of a message of appreciating childlikeness, but it's a good theme to go into. So what is it about childlikeness that we could draw on in face of challenges? Well, one thing is trust. You see that children have a tremendous amount of trust. And especially if, I have to say this with a caveat, that children who have been loved and supported have that sense of trust. You see children who have been damaged, who didn't get that trust. That can happen at a very early age. And you can see the children they put up this wall, and then that freshness, it doesn't, I won't say it dies, but it goes into hibernation until it can be brought out again later, and hopefully this incarnation by some person that reaches out to them. I talk to teachers all the time about this, of trying to create what Master called a safe harbor for children, so that allows them to feel relaxed and they can just blossom, and they open up to that trust again in their being. But for me, one of my most dramatic examples of that was my daughter was about 4 years old, and we lived in a house in Ananda village, and it had a hallway, and then there was a staircase going up at an angle, right angle to the hallway, and there's a little landing about 5 or 6 steps up. And the house was a small house, and you couldn't really see up the stairway when you were walking down the hallway till you got right in front of the stairwell. So I was just walking along and was not expecting anything special. But I got, just as I walked in to that space with the hallway, I heard this little voice say, "Catch, Daddy." And I turned enough to see my daughter throwing herself off the landing 5 steps up and just expecting me, knowing that I was going to catch her. By God's grace, I did. I could have, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't have seen it, but it was just like, for her, it was just this, of course, Daddy's going to be there to catch me. And so I can do that. Now, I don't suggest you try that out unless you've had a lot of experience and cultivating this relationship with God. That God is the ultimate catcher. He's the ultimate one to give us this support. And we do need to cultivate that. I had the amazing good fortune to get to be around Swami for all those decades at the beginning of Ananda, and just watch him do that, watch him live in a life of faith and a life of confidence, well-earned confidence, that if there was something that needed to be done, even though it looked impossible, it could happen, because God was on his side. God was on our side, Ananda's side, and that he would behave that way. He would go out and take what looked like immense risks. So the one I'm thinking of was buying the land for what's now Ananda village. So Swami, if you know the story, he had been working for a few years on his own, teaching classes, saving money, because he felt deeply inspired inwardly that Master wanted him to take on this project of World Brotherhood colonies, spiritual communities. And so he was focused on that. And he used all of his money to make a down payment on this land, which is now the Ananda Meditation Retreat. For those of you who've been there, it's about 5 miles up the road from the community. And I don't think he knew at that point how it was going to go, what was going to happen, but he had this initial piece of land, about 70 acres, raw land. He just had to start from scratch, dig a well, build a bathhouse, temple. Temple actually burned down, which could have dissuaded a lot of people. Oh my God, a bad omen. Well, I happened to have the karma that I arrived the day after the temple burned down. And my first job was raking embers. I never saw the temple, of course, but my job was just, I just came in, okay, what do we do? And actually Jayaji was the man in charge at that point. And he says, well, we're going to rake the embers from this, what used to be a temple. Of course, for Jaya, he knew the temple. It was probably traumatic for him, but for me, it wasn't traumatic at all. It was just like, oh, this is the job today. We'll rake up the embers. So watching Swami not be dissuaded and in the face of challenges that could be crushing to some people, but just to go off and say, okay, talk about being a challenge. That was the challenge. So what do we do next? Rather than, let's sit down and moan and groan and doubt ourselves. No, he had a depth of faith that took him beyond that. And so shortly after that, the people he had bought the original land in a consortium with another 4 or 5 people who weren't connected with Ananda. They were all somewhat spiritual people, but they weren't connected to Master at all. And they made it really clear to Swami that this land was not to be developed as a community. They didn't want children there. It was supposed to be a quiet place, a retreat, a hermitage, to keep that forest setting. So Swami received that message, but it also made, for him, it meant, what do we do now? How do we, because this whole idea of a world brotherhood colony was central to what he didn't, Swami wasn't just interested in providing a meditation retreat. That was fine to do that, but it wasn't going to be the final answer. So he started looking for land. Looking like, okay, this is the way that the situation is moving. We're being asked to find a whole nother piece of land. Well, one turned up 5 miles down the road. But of course, it's expensive, especially since you put all of your savings into the down payment for the original piece of land. But this piece of land was so spectacularly appropriate. If those of you who've been there, you walk in to the beginning of Ananda village and this beautiful valley opens up, and just it's so pristine. It's just, everything just looks like a big central some holding pattern that could hold a beautiful dream of a world brotherhood colony. And so on an inner level, Swami felt this is our place. This is the place for us. And so he just, there was a big drama about other people wanted the land and who's going to get the money together. Anyway, it all worked out. I think there's much more to the story, but just one piece of it is he caught on the phone and he started calling up all these people to get, can you help us with the land? Can you help us with the down payment? And he got enough people to say yes, that he went ahead and signed the papers. And then, as far as I remember, every single person had to back out of that original group. So the money came in other ways, barely. Couple foreclosures became very close to being foreclosed on a couple of times. But, it worked. It worked because that was something that Master wanted, Divine Mother wanted, and Swami was willing to be the instrument to go out on a limb. Now, I want to put a little bit of a a balance to that, because I know some people saw that happen and decided, okay, that's the way you do it. You just do it, and you're going to count on God to fill in the details. But they missed on the part of the inner guidance, the inner resonance that Swami had developed over, at that point, 25 years of discipleship and meditation. He knew what divine guidance felt like, and he would only go out on a limb if he felt the guidance. I watched other people go out on a limb just because they thought, well, I'm going to be like Swami and I'm going to do this great project, and a disaster happened because it didn't have that divine support. So they needed to learn the rest of the story, which is the courage to go out, follow guidance, but with the sense of inner attunement. They have to go together. So then, of course, for me, so my job beginning of back in the 70s was to start Education for Life, the schools. It's just an idea at that point. It was a memory that something that Master had started here in Ranchi in 1916, 15, 16 and 17, and but had moved to the West, found out that in the West there was not the support to start this idea, especially in the 20s and 30s, and left the idea in seed form until Swami came along to create Ananda Village, and it created a magnet for families who wanted this kind of education. And I arrived on the right time and had that job to look into how do you do this. But I won't go into that today. That's not part of the story. But I wanted to tell a couple of stories that had to do with this thing of how do you practice this childlike faith in a challenge. The challenge, when you're facing a challenge, you want to have that trust that God will help you. God, if you align yourself with that divine will, that help will come. And whatever, as Master said, there really are no such things as obstacles. There are only opportunities. And that requires a kind of childlike quality of saying, okay, it's just a challenge. It may be a big challenge, look like a big challenge from where I'm standing, but it's just a challenge. And if it came of itself, I didn't go out looking for it. It came of itself. There must be the divine help available, if I can just tune into it, if I can just move forward and look at whatever doorways open and be open and be ready to act on that one. So many of you might have heard this story, but for the new ones, I'll tell it again because it's such a strong story. So we had just got started. We were up. We had moved into our schoolhouse. It was not finished yet, but we were having school in it. And this is about the first year, I'd say, the end of the first year of the school. And the school was built in a very kind of, at that point, remote place. There was no road going to the school. They had brought the materials down in the really dry season, but the only way there was this very old rutted tractor road that came down from the top of the hill. So their kids were out playing one day, and they came running over to me and said, "Nitai, there's a car coming." And that was big news because there was no way for a car to get there. So what in the world is the car doing trying to come down to the school? And so I went out to see what was happening, and here, sure enough, there's a car coming down the road, bouncing back and forth, and the ruts in the road. And I look, and it's, oh my gosh, it's an official car. It's got a big official design on the side of the car. And the guy pulls up and stops, and it says State Fire Marshal on the car. Well, I didn't even know what a state fire marshal was at that point, but I knew he was official. And the way he got out of the car, he had this clipboard in his hand, and he looked very serious. There was a very big frown on his face. And he said, looks like you've got a school here. And I said, yeah, we do. We have a school here. And he says, well, you know, if you've got a school, you have to have a way for the fire truck to get here in case of fire. We have to keep these kids safe. And I looked at him and I said, really, what does that mean? And he says, well, you've got to have a paved road in here because the fire truck needs to go on this paved road. And I said, a paved road? And I said, it's about at least a mile and a half from here to the paved road. How much do you think it would cost to put a paved road? And he said, oh, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, 500,000, I don't know, but you've got to get it together because otherwise you're not going to be able to school. And I said, whoa. And so he said, all right, I've got you down here. I'm coming back in 2 weeks. If you haven't made significant progress, you're going to have to close your school. So I'm going, whoa, okay. Well, Master, what can I do? What can we, at this point, the school budget at this point is $50 a month. And that would made sure I understood that included my salary. So we had $50 a month, and here was all of a sudden we're supposed to manifest $500,000 for a road. So I tried to be creative, but what could we possibly do? I did look up, and I found out that we could maybe buy our own fire truck for less than $500,000. And I thought, we'll just park it next to this road and then the school, and then the kids can play on it when they. But even that, you know, even it was only 150,000 rather than 500,000, it was way, way beyond anything we could do. So I just basically had to say, Master, this is your project. I'm willing to do anything you can want me to do, but I see no way forward. So it looks like to me like the history of EF Education for Life is going to be about 11 months long. And we're going to go back, have to close up shop. So I prayed, I put it in Master's lap, and then I just went on we had classes. But 2 weeks later, the kids come running and say, Nitai, that car's coming back. And I said, whoops, okay. So I watched the car come down the hill, and I'm thinking, okay, this is the end. But I look, it's a different fellow driving the car, and he's smiling when he pulls up. Same car, but he's smiling, and he gets out. He doesn't have a clipboard. He just looks at me and nods and says, "Hi, I'm here to check up on this report of you having a school out here, and you need what does it say? See, and you need fire, a way to help the kids if in case of fire." And he looks around and he says, "Well, you've got this big clearing around the school." He said, all you need to do is really be able to get them outside in case there's a fire, and they'll probably be safe. And you have to, I said, yeah, that would be I'd love to do that. And he said, he didn't mention the fire truck yet. And I keep waiting for him to mention the fire truck. Didn't say that. He says, you just need a way to get the kids' attention so that they'll go out And when in the case of fire, he said, like, if you had a whistle, if you had a whistle, you could blow the whistle in case of fire, and the kids would be trained to go outside. He said, do you have a whistle? And I said, no, but we can get a whistle. And he says, fine. And he said, I'll sign you off, and you can go ahead. Got back in the car, drove off, and that was it. And so, I did ask him. I said, what happened to the man that was here last week, last visit? He said, he decided that he wanted to go into arson investigation, and he got transferred to a different department. So I thought, wow, okay, here's a very clear case that Master's behind this project. He wants this education for life work to grow and to survive and move forward. And he would be willing to step in and just plant this seed that this man he'd be more fulfilled investigating potential arsonists than he was going around talking to people like me. So it helped me, because it helped me to see that, okay, it's great to observe Swami acting in that sense of faith, that childlike faith that we could go forward. But I had to make the further step of being able to do it myself. And this was one of the biggest events for me, of just showing me, you got Master will work through you too. Now, yes, he'll work through Swami, but he's there for everybody. He's there for everybody if they simply will cultivate and make it a point to cultivate this sense of attunement, but also courage and willingness to face the challenge. So challenges come up. Do we face them with energy, or do we hide and say, oh, no, wait a minute. This challenge is in the wrong place. It's supposed to be over there. It's not supposed to be here. It's somebody else's challenge. But that's, of course, not the way that it works. If it's your challenge, and everybody has their challenge, that's just part of life. That's how we grow. We don't grow without challenge. The Master said an easy life is not a victorious life. So when the challenges come, it's just Master's way of saying, okay, you're serious. We're gonna give you the things that are really gonna make you want to implement these teachings and really cultivate that divine connection. So there were many other examples of that for me, but I'll just tell one more. So this is on a few years. It's like, I think 1997, 98. We just we started our high school, and one of the things we found out, we tried to have as little to do with the bureaucracy, the state bureaucracy, as possible. My friend here called it red tape-itis. I told Dr. Amar he'd made a wonderful diagnosis of the disease. But we tried to stay away from it because, the things like with the state fire marshal, it's just set up, they're just set up with a different mindset. The idea of this community out in the woods didn't fit into any of their categories, so it was very hard to communicate with them. But for this case with the high school, we had to, because in order for our students to go on to college, we needed to get accredited. Otherwise, their degree, their diploma, wouldn't transfer easily. It would still possible to transfer, but it would be much harder. And so we wanted to go through this process. It's a huge undertaking. It was like trying to learn a new language, and that had a different alphabet and a different set of grammar rules and everything else in order to communicate with in this case, the Board of Education. But we got to the point of we were going to have a visit and an inspection, basically, by some representatives. And so we got ready. They were going to come. They came this one day. They drove up in their nice, new, clean car that, again, didn't fit Ananda at that point with our dusty roads and big things. But they got out. I didn't know who was going to come, but the leader, he was very kind of dignified man, had very nice clothes on, very nice suit, and looked like he was important. And so I thought, okay, I wonder how this is going to go, because we were extremely alternative at that point. We didn't look, this is again, a long time ago, 30 years ago almost. And we were and now it's not, society's moved much closer to what Ananda represents in those intervening years. But at that point, we were still really pretty much a fringe in people's consciousness. We were vegetarian, we practiced yoga, we lived in a community, all these things that was like, what? Didn't fit into people's framework. So I thought, well, this will be interesting to see what happens. So our first class that day was Hatha Yoga. We started the day with a circle, and one of the girls was leading Hatha Yoga that day. And I'm sitting there and watching this man, and you can see this is not his thing. Hatha Yoga is not something that's part of his world. And that was not the best start. So I'm kind of, again, just thinking, well, Master, it's your school. You're going to have to do something helpful. So we finished the Hatha Yoga, and we're walking back to the classroom, and I'm walking with him. And I was just trying to be friendly. And I says, oh, so what kind of education background do you have? What kind of role? He says, well, I was principal. I've been director of high school in Sacramento. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, which high school? And he said, it's called Miraloma High School. And I said, oh, Miraloma. I said, Miraloma, my mother worked at Miraloma High School. And he said, your mother? We worked at Miraloma, like, you have a mother that would do something like that? And I said, yeah. He said, well, what was her name? And I said, her name was Daphne. And I didn't get to finish the name. I said, Daphne. And he stopped me. He says, Daphne? And he says, Daphne Johnson? That was her name at that point. And I said, yeah, that's my mom. And he says, oh my gosh, Daphne, she's my favorite employee. I just, she's such a jewel. She does such good work in the school. And immediately his whole approach to me changed, because he knew my mom, and he knew my mom was a wonderful person. And again, I thought, what are the chances of that happening? But it was a case where Master found a way. Master found a way because we needed to move the school forward. And I didn't know how to do it, but this was just doing what was in front of me. But at the exact right moment, that support was there that we needed exactly. And the man was enough that he gave us initial approval that lasted, I think, 3 years at that point. And then we got us off on a roll that we're still moving along. But again, it was just things like that when I first started hearing Swami, when I first started listening to Swami, and I was just amazed at the stories he would tell, the stories that illustrated the topics he was going to make. And I thought, how did he get those stories? That's amazing. How would you get those great stories? But it was through situations like this that my own set of stories started to come. And I was just saying, oh, it's not something, Swami didn't have a cornerstone on those stories. Everybody has them. As we go through it, everybody in the room, I'm sure, has these. But this is, again, part of this idea of keeping the childlike approach, because we have this wonderful tool called memory. And if we use our memory, Master talks about this, there's a right and a wrong way to use memory. The right way is to remember stories like I just told. Those times when God was such a wonderful, sweet part of your life, and he gave you the guidance and the grace or whatever it took to go through. There are other stories that we might be carrying, stories where, for whatever reason, we didn't do so well. Maybe we fell short, maybe we made a mistake, maybe we don't really understand things, like, maybe we took it as an event and we took it in the wrong way. I'm thinking like with Swami, the cornerstone event in his life, well, the second one, the first one was meeting Master, but the second one was being tossed out of SRF, and how he could have relived that over and over again with resentment and say, why did they do that? Oh, those mean people. Why did they understand me? And feeling judged or feeling slighted. But he wouldn't do that. He said there was certainly a big challenge in his life. He thought it was the biggest challenge in his life, because all of a sudden he felt, what do I do? But gradually, and it took him a while, which is kind of nice to know that he couldn't do it just overnight. So it gives us hope that we can work on our stuff and get around to a positive resolution. But gradually started to see that was the biggest blessing of his life, or the second biggest blessing after seeing Master, because it freed him to create Ananda. and to help all of us move along. But we have to be careful. We have to be careful because if we use our memory to drag up negative things, then we're gonna lose that childlikeness. We're gonna lose that faith in the divine because we're just entrenching that negative overlay on it, that somehow we're victims, or we're not, the God doesn't really love us. God doesn't really care for us. So it's important to keep this attitude, to collect your stories. It's nice to even write them down, put them in a diary, just to know what are these different times where God manifested for you in your life, helped you in a certain situation. And have your own stories. Maybe you will have a chance to share them with others, but that's not really important. The important thing is they happen to you. And there are things that you want to emphasize, that you want to underline and bring back to memory. And take time occasionally, especially if you're going on a seclusion or going on a little retreat or something. Take the time to go over those main stories that have come to you and really absorb that sense of, I'm loved. God loves me. I might have my problems. I might have my shortcomings, but don't spend too much time. It's okay to realize once in a while that you're not perfect and that there's a few things you have to work on, because I've seen people who don't do that and they can kind of get caught in the other end of the spectrum where it's like, wow, I'm perfect and I never make mistakes. But don't dwell on the mistakes. Just kind of pass over them gently. And then move on to successes, move on to the positive things that you can manifest. And with that, you're going to be ready for the challenges that come. You'll be ready because you'll have that faith in the divine that no matter what comes, there isn't anything that could possibly come to you that God can't, that isn't actually a potential step forward for you in your spiritual growth. Everything that comes to you is an opportunity for spiritual advancement, if the attitude's right. So we don't have to fear. We don't have to have fear anymore, because we're devotees, we're disciples. We know that God is, the whole universe is created to help us move forward in our consciousness, and the only reason for these challenges is to give us the option to move in that direction. And so to cultivate that attitude will keep you childlike, increase more and more that, God's going to be there. God will be there when I need it. It may come in a very surprising way, which is often really this case, that we're looking over here for the answer, and the answer is over here knocking on the door, and we're saying, wait a minute, I'm not ready. But then all of a sudden you turn, oh, that was the answer. Oh, okay, all right, I got it. So that's part of the play too. Divine Mother seems to like that. So I hope we can all go forward in that consciousness. Okay. Right.